HOA torched my winter supplies, so I cranked the spillway and sank their suburb. They thought I would cry. They thought I would beg. They thought I would freeze all winter. But when I saw my barn burning, when I smelled the smoke of everything I saved for my family, something inside me snapped. And that giant steel wheel by the dam. Yeah. I turned it. And what happened next? The entire neighborhood will never forget. Welcome back to HOA Stories. My name is Mark. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. I work maintenance for the county water system. And I used to believe rules were meant to protect people. Until my HOA made it their mission to destroy me. If you truly hate toxic HOAs, if you believe in standing up to power trips, subscribe right now. And comment BOHOA if you've ever dealt with one. Share this with anyone who has suffered under HOA madness. Now let me tell you how this all started. I wasn't always the crazy spillway guy. Before the flood. Before the fire. Before the chaos. I was just the quiet guy at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. My house sat near the old county spillway. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. Every winter in Ohio gets brutal. Freezing winds. Power outages. Snowstorms that lock you inside for days. So I prepared. I stocked wood. Propane tanks. Canned food. Water barrels. Not because I was paranoid. Because I worked county maintenance. I knew how fragile things really were. The HOA didn't like that. They said my stacked firewood was visually disruptive. They said my covered fuel drums were non-compliant storage units. They said my barn looked agricultural. Yeah, that's because it was. The first warning letter came in October. Bright red ink. Final notice. For stacking winter firewood beyond approved aesthetic height. I laughed. Who measures wood height? Apparently, the Maple Ridge HOA does. Then came the second letter. Remove visible propane tanks. Then the third. Unapproved bulk food storage visible through barn window. That's when I realized. They weren't enforcing rules. They were targeting me. The HOA president. Diane Keller. Perfect blonde hair. Permanent tight smile. Eyes cold like ice. She knocked on my door one evening. Mark, this isn't the kind of neighborhood for survival setups. Survival setups. It was wood and soup. I told her politely. Winter is coming. She leaned closer. So are fines. That's when the harassment started. Weekly inspections. Photos taken from the sidewalk. Violation letters for things no one else got cited for. My neighbor Tom had a broken boat in his driveway for 2 years. No fine. But my stacked firewood. That was a threat to civilization. They held a meeting about me. About me. Like I was some criminal mastermind. One HOA board member even said, "What if he's preparing for something?" Yeah, winter. Then the fines hit. $200. Then $500. Then $1,200. For non-compliant storage. I refused to pay. Because I wasn't breaking county law. Only their little control club rules. And that's when things turned dark. One night in December. Snow falling heavy. I smelled something strange. Not fireplace smoke. Not normal smoke. This was sharp. Thick. Wrong. I stepped outside. And my barn. My winter stockpile. Was on fire. Flames tearing through the wood walls. Propane tanks exploding inside. Orange light lighting up the snow. I stood there frozen. Not from the cold. But from disbelief. And across the flooded streetlight glow, I saw silhouettes. 3 men. Watching. One of them wearing a familiar black jacket. HOA logo stitched on the sleeve. They didn't run. They just stood there. Like they were waiting for something. The fire department arrived. They ruled it electrical. Funny thing is, that barn had no electricity. Not a single wire. When I told the police about the silhouettes, they shrugged. No proof. No camera footage. Just smoke and ashes. And a winter ahead with no supplies. The HOA sent me another letter the next morning. Structure destroyed. Property now compliant. I stared at that line for a long time. Property now compliant. They burned it. And called it compliance. That's when something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not rage. Something colder. More calculated. Because see, I work county water control. And the spillway gate near my house controls overflow levels for the entire subdivision. Normally, it's locked, monitored, regulated. But during heavy storm overflow, manual release is required. And guess what? A massive winter rainstorm was forecast. 3 days later, ice melting, river swelling, and Maple Ridge sits lower than the spillway basin. That giant steel valve wheel suddenly didn't look like machinery. It looked like leverage. And when I checked the weather report that night and saw the storm warning, I realized something. Nature was about to give me an opportunity. The question was, would you have done the same thing I did? Or would you have just let it go? The storm came faster than they predicted. Cold rain started before sunrise. Not soft rain. Heavy. Relentless. The kind that eats snow in hours. I stood at my kitchen window watching the backyard turn into mud. The river behind the subdivision was already rising. I could hear it. That low, deep rumble. Like something waking up. Maple Ridge sat in a shallow bowl. Most people never noticed. But I did. Because I had seen the flood maps. Because I maintained the gates. Because I knew exactly how much water it took. My phone buzzed. County emergency alert. Rapid snowmelt and rainfall may cause localized flooding. Localized. That word made me laugh. There was nothing local about what was coming. I drove to the spillway around noon. Official reason. Inspection. Unofficial reason. I needed to see it myself. The basin was already near capacity. Brown water spinning. Chunks of ice smashing against the concrete walls. The steel wheel sat there. Massive. Cold. Silent. Manual override only during emergency overflow. Technically, we were approaching emergency levels. Technically, releasing water early prevents structural damage. Technically, I had authority to assist. But timing. Timing was everything. I checked upstream gauges. Another surge coming. Fast. I leaned on the railing. Rain soaking my jacket. And I thought about my barn. About the letter. Property now compliant. My jaw tightened. Then my radio crackled. Mark, you monitoring spillway levels? It was Jeff from County Control. Yeah. Keep an eye on it. We might need partial release if this keeps up. Partial. Controlled. Safe. That's what they expected. I drove back home. Water was pooling at the end of the street. Storm drains struggling. Neighbors outside moving trash bins. Lifting patio furniture. panicked energy rising. And then I saw Diane. Standing on her porch. Watching the sky. Perfect hair ruined by rain. For the first time. She looked unsure. Our eyes met. She didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just stared. Maybe she remembered the compliant letter. Maybe she thought I'd move away after losing everything. She had no idea. By evening, the river crossed warning level. County sent second alert. Flash flood advisory. That word hit different. Advisory means get ready. I grabbed my rain gear. Drove back to the spillway. This time, the basin roared. Water nearly touching the emergency markers. Debris slamming into the gates. Pressure building. Too much pressure can damage infrastructure. That's real. That's fact. If the gate jams under full surge, it becomes catastrophic. That's also fact. I unlocked the manual housing. My hands steady. Heartbeat slow. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was precise. I radioed in. Levels critical. Beginning manual assist. Jeff replied. Copy. Small adjustment only. Small. Yeah. I gripped the steel wheel. Cold metal biting into my palms. And I turned it. Just a quarter rotation. Water thundered through. White explosion below. Spray blasting upward. The release channel filled instantly. Fast. But not catastrophic. Not yet. I watched downstream monitors. Street level rising. Storm drains overwhelmed. Then the second surge hit upstream. Harder than predicted. The basin climbed again. Faster than models expected. This was the moment. If I waited, gate strain risk increases. If I release more, downstream floods. But legally, I could justify preventing infrastructure failure. That's the beauty of gray areas. They live between right and wrong. I turned the wheel again. Half rotation this time. The sound was deafening. Like a dam breaking. Water shot through the spillway tunnel. Roaring toward Maple Ridge. Within minutes, the lower streets began filling. Not trickling. Filling. Cars sitting low in driveways. Water climbing tire by tire. People running outside. Confused. Shouting. I watched from the platform. Rain pouring down my face. Street cameras showed chaos. One feed zoomed near Diane's house. Water crawling across her lawn. Then over the sidewalk. Then into her garage. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just observed. The surge stabilized the basin. Technically, the gate operation prevented structural overload. Technically, I followed emergency discretion protocol. Technically, everything was defendable. But emotionally, it felt like balance. Like scale correction. My radio exploded with chatter. Lower subdivision flooding. Why was release increased? Who authorized that volume? I pressed the button calmly. Manual assist required to prevent gate stress. Surge exceeded projection. Silence. No one could immediately contradict that. Because the surge really did exceed projection. By nightfall, Maple Ridge looked like a lake. Streetlights reflecting on brown water. Residents evacuating. Fire trucks everywhere. And there she was. Diane. Standing ankle deep in water. Shouting at emergency crews. Hair soaked. Makeup running. Control gone. Completely gone. One of the HOA board members slipped trying to move paperwork boxes. Files floating away in muddy water. I felt something strange. Not joy. Not revenge. Closure. They burned my preparation. They mocked my caution. They punished compliance. Now they were begging for rescue. At 10 p.m. County ordered full emergency release to stabilize upper region. Which meant more water. Not my call this time. Nature finished what it started. By midnight, basements were underwater. Garages destroyed. Cars totaled. And Maple Ridge was officially declared a flood zone. I stood alone by the spillway. Rain slowing. Storm weakening. Water level finally stabilizing. The steel wheel rested. Silent again. But I knew something. This wasn't over. Because floods leave damage. And damage brings investigation. And investigations bring questions. And questions eventually lead back to whoever touched the wheel. The next morning, news vans lined the entrance. Reporters calling it unexpected infrastructure surge. Unexpected. I went home. Water stopped 2 houses short of mine. Elevation advantage. Preparation advantage. I stepped onto my dry porch and saw a soaked envelope stuck to my door. HOA Emergency Assessment Notice. Special fee for flood recovery. Even after everything, they still thought they had power. I looked down the street. At ruined carpets dragged outside. At neighbors crying. At Diane screaming into her phone. And I realized this story wasn't about water. It was about control. And control was slipping from their hands. The real question is, when the investigation starts digging into spillway logs, do you think they'll find a villain? Or a hero who followed protocol? The news vans didn't leave for 3 days. Every channel called it a rare infrastructure failure. Rare. That word again. Like disasters just fall out of the sky. By morning the flood water started to recede. But what it left behind? Mud. Ruined drywall. Broken furniture. The smell. God, the smell was everywhere. I walked down Maple Ridge Lane in rubber boots. Not to celebrate. Not to gloat. Just to observe. Neighbors ripped carpets out onto their lawns. Children's toys floated in thick brown puddles. A couch sat upside down in the middle of the street. And right in front of Diane's house. Stacks of soggy HOA paperwork. Spread out like trash. Her garage door hung crooked. Waterline halfway up the walls. She stood there barking orders into her phone. Blaming the county. Blaming the city. Blaming irresponsible water management. When she saw me, she froze. For a second, I thought she might scream at me. But she didn't. She just stared. Like she was trying to connect dots. Later that afternoon, County sent out a review notice. All manual spillway actions logged. All personnel statements required. There it was. The beginning. Jeff called me. You did a second rotation before central authorization? His voice wasn't accusing. Just careful. I kept mine steady. Upstream surge exceeded projection. Gate strain risk was increasing. Silence. He knew that was possible. Log show timing was tight. Storm was tight. Another pause. No one's blaming you yet. Yet. That word stayed in my head. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt. From anticipation. Because if they start digging deep, they'll look at footage. At angles. At release volume. And maybe, just maybe, someone will ask why the downstream alert wasn't pushed sooner. But here's the thing. Flood warnings were issued. People ignored them. Because Maple Ridge believed it was untouchable. HOA neighborhoods always think they're protected. Rules feel like armor. But rules don't stop water. The next HOA emergency meeting was held in a rented hotel conference room. Flooded clubhouse. I wasn't invited. But I went anyway. Open floor session. They couldn't stop me. The room smelled like damp carpet and frustration. Residents furious. Voices raised. One man shouted, "Where were the emergency drains you promised last year?" Another yelled, "What happened to the flood reserve fund?" Diane tried to regain control. Her voice sharp. This was a county mismanagement issue. That's when I stood up. Slow. Calm. All flood alerts were issued 48 hours prior. Heads turned. Diane's eyes narrowed. The spillway release prevented upstream structural collapse. Murmurs filled the room. She snapped back. You increased volume beyond scheduled authorization. There it was. Out in the open. I didn't flinch. Manual discretion is permitted under surge stress. Basin reached critical marker. Someone in the crowd asked, "So you saved the dam?" I nodded. Silence. You could feel it shifting. Because now the narrative wasn't simple. It wasn't villain and victim. It was complex. Messy. One older man stood up. If that gate failed, would we be worse off? I answered honestly. Yes. More silence. Diane slammed her folder shut. This isn't about hypotheticals. Homes are destroyed. I stepped forward. And my barn wasn't? The room went still. She tried to brush it off. That was an unrelated electrical incident. No electricity in that barn. Gasps. Neighbors looking at each other. Seeds planted. After the meeting, a woman approached me quietly. She lived 3 houses down. I saw people near your property the night of the fire. My heart slowed. Who? She hesitated. One of them looked like Brad, from the HOA board. Brad. The loud one. The guy who called my supplies doomsday garbage. I kept my face neutral. Would you say that publicly? She looked at the ground. I don't want trouble. Exactly. That's how HOAs survive. Fear of social exile. But the flood changed something. Because now everyone was angry. Not just me. Insurance companies started asking questions. Why wasn't flood insurance mandatory in a known basin zone? Why was emergency drainage improvement budget reallocated last year? Where did that money go? I already knew. New clubhouse renovation. Landscaping redesign. Decorative entrance sign. All aesthetics. No infrastructure. Control over safety. The irony was brutal. 2 days later, county audit team arrived. They reviewed my logs. They reviewed rainfall data. They reviewed surge metrics. Everything technically aligned. Barely. But enough. Jeff pulled me aside. You're clear on protocol. Relief didn't hit. Because this wasn't about the county anymore. This was about the neighborhood. About reputation. About whispers. That evening, someone spray painted on the damaged HOA sign. Let it flood. In big red letters. Residents laughed when they saw it. Diane didn't. Her power was slipping. And she knew it. But here's where things twisted. Insurance investigators also reopened fire reports. Because flood victims started comparing stories. And patterns surfaced. 3 prior rule violators in past years. All experienced sudden property damage. 1 garage fire. 1 mysterious vandalism. 1 shed collapse. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Maple Ridge enforced compliance in darker ways. I started connecting dots. And the more I looked, the more I realized. This wasn't just petty fines. This was intimidation. And if they could burn my barn, what else were they capable of? That night, I checked my security backups. I had installed independent cameras months ago. Not connected to HOA grid. 1 camera caught something faint. 3 figures near my property. License plate partially visible. Enhancing footage took time. But the plate began to sharpen. And when I ran it through public registry, it matched Brad's truck. Now the flood didn't feel like revenge. It felt like exposure. Because if I go public with this, if I show the footage, if residents see it, the HOA doesn't just lose power. It collapses. But going public means war. Legal. Social. Personal. And I'm not the only one living here. So now I'm standing at another kind of spillway. Not water. Truth. If I release it, there's no controlling the damage. The question is, do I open this gate too? Do I open this gate too? That question sat heavy in my chest all night. Not about water. About truth. I stared at the paused frame on my laptop. 3 figures. 1 truck. Brad's plate number glowing faint in the corner. The fire wasn't random. It wasn't electrical. It wasn't an accident. And if that footage goes public, Maple Ridge explodes in a whole different way. Morning came gray and cold. The flood mud still drying on sidewalks. Insurance inspectors moving door to door. People tired. Angry. Looking for someone to blame. Diane was already outside when I stepped onto my porch. Talking to a man in a suit. Probably an attorney. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. But socially. Power drains fast when people stop fearing you. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Turner? Calm voice. Controlled. Yes. This is Brad Collins. There it was. No hiding. No pretending. I think we need to talk. I almost laughed. You mean like the night my barn burned? Silence. Then. This isn't something you want to escalate. Threat. Soft. But clear. I have footage, I said. His breathing changed. Just slightly. Footage can be misunderstood. Yeah. That's what guilty people say. I'm meeting with the board tonight, he added. Don't do anything stupid. He hung up. I stood there in the cold. Heart steady. Because now it wasn't suspicion. It was pressure. They were scared. That afternoon I got a knock. Not Diane. Not Brad. A county investigator. Official badge. Serious face. We're reviewing structural decisions made during the surge. I nodded. Invited him in. We sat at my kitchen table. Mud stains still visible outside my window. Your timing prevented upstream failure, he said. But it increased downstream damage significantly. That's the balance. Always the balance. I followed emergency discretion policy. He nodded slowly. Technically, yes. Technically. That word again. He closed his folder. We also reopened the fire case. There it was. My pulse didn't move. New information surfaced. I didn't tell him about the footage. Not yet. Because once you hand over power, you lose control of the narrative. And I wasn't done deciding. That evening the HOA emergency meeting was bigger. Packed. No more calm hotel room. This was loud. Residents furious about assessments. Special recovery fees. Temporary dues increase. Diane tried to maintain order. Gavel hitting plastic table. Please, please. No one listened. Brad stood beside her. Arms crossed. Scanning the room. When I walked in, he saw me immediately. And I saw something new in his eyes. Not confidence. Fear. I didn't sit. I stood near the back. Waiting. Letting the chaos rise. One homeowner shouted. Why were drainage upgrades delayed last year? Another yelled. Where did our reserve funds go? Diane's voice cracked. Renovation improvements were voted on. By who? Someone screamed. By the board. Exactly. By the board. Closed circle. No transparency. That's when Brad pointed at me. This man increased the spillway release. Room went quiet. All eyes on me. Diane seized the moment. His actions directly worsened the flooding. There it was. The shift. Blame. Simple. Convenient. I stepped forward. Slow. Controlled. County audit cleared my protocol. Murmurs. Brad shook his head. You exceeded recommended rotation. Under surge stress. I looked directly at Diane. Just like you exceeded authority when you sent compliance threats. Gasps. Now it wasn't about water. It was personal. She forced a smile. This isn't about your barn. No electricity in that barn. Silence again. Brad's jaw tightened. I reached into my jacket. Pulled out a printed still image. Blurry. But recognizable. Truck plate visible. 3 figures. Near my property. The room leaned forward. What's that? Someone asked. I didn't answer immediately. Let suspense breathe. It's security footage from the night my barn burned. Brad's face drained. Diane's hands stopped moving. That's ridiculous, she said quickly. Is it? I held the image higher. Because that plate belongs to a board member. Voices exploded. What? No way. Show us. Brad lunged forward slightly. This is harassment. I stepped back. No, this is evidence. The crowd shifted. Energy turning. Not against me. Against them. Diane tried to regain control. This meeting is adjourned. But no one left. Residents surrounded the table. Demanding answers. Brad grabbed Diane's arm. Whispering something. They pushed through the crowd and exited fast. Power walking away. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about dismantling a system. A petty little dictatorship built on landscaping rules and intimidation. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. Private number. You crossed a line, Brad said immediately. You burned my barn. You can't prove that. I just did. Heavy breathing on the other end. You think flooding the neighborhood makes you a hero? There it was. He believed it was intentional. Which meant he believed I had motive. Which meant he knew why. I stayed calm. I prevented a structural collapse. He laughed. Cold. You're not the only one who knows how to play gray areas. Then he hung up. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. Rain clouds gone. Moonlight faint. Floodwater almost fully drained now. But tension rising. Because when people with power start losing it, they get reckless. The next morning, HOA website went offline. Board member contact info removed. Emergency announcement posted. Temporary leadership restructuring. Translation. Damage control. By afternoon, 2 more residents came forward, saying they had experienced strange incidents after violating HOA rules. Tires slashed. Windows cracked. Anonymous threats. Pattern forming. Fast. County investigator called again. We'd like a copy of that footage. Now the gate was right in front of me. Release the truth. Or hold it. Because once authorities take it, the story changes. It becomes legal, public, messy, and maybe dangerous. I looked down Maple Ridge Lane. Neighbors cleaning, talking, whispering. For the first time, the HOA board wasn't the center of power. The residents were. And I realized, opening one spillway changed the water. But opening this one changes everything. So tell me, if exposing the truth destroys the entire HOA, would you hit send or stay silent? Would you hit send or stay silent? I didn't sleep that night. The footage sat on my laptop. Paused. Brad's truck. 3 shadows. The glow of my burning barn behind them. One click. And everything changes. One click. And I'm no longer just the quiet guy at the end of the street. I'm the man who brought the HOA down. Morning came slow. Clouds hanging low over Maple Ridge. Mud finally drying. But tension thicker than ever. My phone buzzed again. County investigator. We need that footage today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Pressure building from both sides. HOA scrambling. County digging. Residents whispering. I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table. And watched Diane outside. She wasn't barking orders anymore. She was avoiding eye contact. 2 board members' cars were gone. Brad's truck missing. Rumors travel fast in suburbs. By noon, the HOA sent an official email blast. Unverified accusations circulating. Legal counsel engaged. Legal counsel. Translation. Threat mode activated. 10 minutes later, a certified letter arrived at my door. Cease and desist. Accusing me of defamation. Claiming the photo was altered. Warning of legal action. I almost smiled. If they were innocent, they'd demand investigation. Not silence. That's when I knew. The gate had to open. I grabbed my external drive. Copied everything. Original footage. Timestamps. Backup logs. Metadata. Then I drove straight to the county office. No drama. No announcement. Just handed it over. The investigator didn't react much. But I saw it in his eyes. This was bigger than flood management now. By late afternoon, police vehicles rolled quietly into Maple Ridge. Not lights flashing. Not sirens. Quiet. Controlled. They stopped at Brad's house. Neighbors came outside. Phones in hand. Recording. Diane's curtains moved. She was watching. Brad stepped out, trying to look calm. They spoke. He gestured wildly. Then the officers asked him to turn around. The click of handcuffs echoed down the street. Soft, but heavy. Gasps everywhere. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." And just like that, the illusion shattered. Within an hour, news vans were back. But this time, it wasn't about flood damage. It was about arson. HOA board investigation. Misuse of funds. Insurance fraud. Everything cracked open at once. By evening, 2 more board members were brought in for questioning. Financial records seized. Emails pulled. Turns out, drainage upgrade funds were diverted. Emergency reserve misused. And enforcement pressure tactics documented in private messages. They didn't just want compliance. They wanted control. And fear was their tool. Diane tried to hold a press statement. But no one listened. Her voice shook. She claimed she knew nothing. Claimed Brad acted alone. But leaked emails showed otherwise. Threat discussions. Target lists. My name included. The flood wasn't revenge anymore. It became exposure. Residents gathered outside that night. Not angry. Not panicked. Relieved. Like a weight lifted. One older neighbor approached me. "You saved the dam, and you saved us from them." I didn't know how to respond. Because the truth was complicated. I didn't release that water purely to save infrastructure. And I didn't expose the footage purely to save the neighborhood. It was mixed. Gray. Human. The county cleared me officially the next morning. Statement released. Emergency spillway operation followed discretionary protocol under surge conditions. Clean. Professional. Safe. Insurance companies started denying certain flood claims tied to HOA negligence. Class action whispers began. Lawyers smelling opportunity. Diane resigned 2 days later. No speech. No apology. Just a letter posted online. Stepping down for the good of the community. Brad was charged with arson and conspiracy. More charges pending. The clubhouse remained closed. Board dissolved temporarily. Emergency resident committee formed. For the first time, votes were open. Finances transparent. Drainage improvements prioritized. Real infrastructure. Not landscaping. And my house still stood dry. Neighbors stopped by more often. Not to accuse. Not to judge. But to talk. To ask questions. To thank me. It felt strange. Being seen. After years of being targeted. One evening, as the sun finally broke through gray clouds, I walked back to the spillway. Water calm now. Steel wheel still. Quiet. I placed my hand on it. Cold. Solid. Powerful. I realized something. Power isn't evil. It's how it's used. HOAs weren't the villain. Corrupt people were. Systems don't burn barns. People do. Systems don't threaten neighbors. People do. And sometimes, systems need pressure to reveal cracks. Maple Ridge wasn't perfect now. But it was awake. Alert. Less afraid. I looked downstream. Where the flood had once roared. Now just a steady flow. Controlled. Balanced. And for the first time in months, I felt calm. Not victorious. Not proud. Just balanced. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes. It flows quietly. Through consequences. But here's what still lingers in my mind. If that storm never came. If the basin never surged. If I never had that legal gray window. Would I still have found another way to bring them down? Or was nature the real hero in this story? What do you think? If that storm never came. I've replayed that question 100 times. Standing at the spillway. Hand on cold steel. Watching the water move like nothing ever happened. But things did happen. And Maple Ridge would never be the same. The arrests didn't end everything. They just cracked it open. Investigators kept coming. Asking more questions. Digging deeper. Financial audits expanded. Board emails recovered. Private group chats exposed. It wasn't just Brad. It was a pattern. Intimidation tactics. Selective enforcement. Threat letters used as leverage. Target homeowners marked as problem cases. My name appeared on a list titled Pressure Until Compliance. Seeing that hit harder than the flood. Because it meant it wasn't random. It wasn't personal emotion. It was planned control. The temporary resident committee asked me to attend their first open meeting. Not as a suspect. Not as a target. But as a voice. That felt strange. The same room that once fined me for stacked firewood. Now asking for my input on safety upgrades. I kept it simple. Transparency first. Infrastructure second. No closed-door decisions. People nodded. No one argued. Fear had shifted sides. But here's the thing about power vacuums. When one structure collapses, something replaces it. And not everyone wants peace. 2 nights later. Someone smashed my mailbox. No note. No signature. Just a bat taken to metal. Old habits don't die clean. I didn't call police immediately. I installed another camera instead. Higher angle. Wider coverage. If someone wanted escalation, they'd have to show their face. Insurance companies began denying flood claims linked to HOA negligence. Residents furious again. But this time, not at me. At the old board. Class action attorneys started knocking on doors. Free consultation. Possible compensation. Lawsuits stacking. Diane tried to stay quiet. But leaks continued. Turns out, she approved the diversion of drainage funds. Signed off on aesthetic projects instead. All while ignoring engineering warnings. She wasn't criminally charged. Yet. But civil liability loomed heavy. Brad remained in custody. Arson charges formalized. Conspiracy added. His bail denied. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. Just confirmation. The footage had done its job. One afternoon, Jeff from County Control came by my house. No badge. No clipboard. Just coffee cups in hand. You're kind of a legend now, he joked. I shook my head. I didn't plan any of this. He leaned against my porch railing. Maybe not, but you exposed something rotten. We watched neighbors repairing drywall. Replacing insulation. Rebuilding. You know they'll always wonder about your timing, he added. I knew. And that's the shadow that lingers. Technically cleared. Morally gray. Because yes. The surge was real. The strain risk was real. But I didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. If anything, I leaned into it. And sometimes at night, I ask myself, was that justice? Or was that revenge disguised as protocol? The resident committee voted to dissolve the old HOA structure entirely. Reform under new bylaws. No enforcement without majority vote. Mandatory financial transparency. Infrastructure spending locked first. A real system. Built slower. Less flashy. But fair. For the first time, Maple Ridge felt like a neighborhood. Not a regime. Kids playing again. People talking without whispering. No more red violation letters. No more anonymous threats. Just normal suburban life. As normal as suburbs get. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. You ruined everything we built. No signature. But I didn't need one. Someone still believed the old order was right. Still believed control equals safety. Still believed I crossed a line. And maybe I did. Because destruction is destruction. Whether it's fire. Or water. Or exposure. Later that week, county engineers completed a full spillway review. Public report released. Structural integrity confirmed. Emergency release justified. But recommendation added. Future downstream impact modeling must improve notification timing. Translation. They won't let it happen like that again. Systems adapt. That's what they do. One evening, as sunset painted the sky orange, I walked past Diane's house. For sale sign in the yard. She was packing boxes. Our eyes met. Long. Quiet. No anger. Just exhaustion. She spoke first. You could have handled it differently. I stopped. So could you. Silence again. Neither of us apologized. Because apologies don't rebuild barns. Or basements. She turned away. And I kept walking. The spillway hummed softly in the distance. Steady. Controlled. Months passed. Repairs completed. Lawsuits filed. New board elected. Flood memorial meeting held. Not for victims. But as a lesson. About transparency. About oversight. About what happens when small power grows unchecked. They asked me to speak. I didn't prepare notes. I just said. Systems fail when fear replaces fairness. Simple. True. That night, standing alone again at the spillway, I realized something deeper. Water doesn't choose sides. It follows gravity. Fire doesn't choose victims. It follows fuel. Power doesn't choose morality. It follows character. And when character cracks, everything downstream pays. My barn is gone. But I'm rebuilding. Stronger. Safer. No HOA permission required. The neighborhood is rebuilding too. Not just walls. Trust. And trust takes longer. But here's the part one still can't shake. If another corrupt board rises one day, if control creeps back quietly, will I be strong enough to fight it legally? Without ever touching that wheel again. Or once you've opened a gate like that, does it change you forever? What would you do? Or once you've opened a gate like that, does it change you forever? I used to think power was loud. Explosive. Obvious. Like floodwater crashing through a spillway. But real power is quiet. It sits in rooms with closed doors. It hides inside board votes. It signs papers no one reads. And for a long time, Maple Ridge let it happen. Because comfort is easy. And confrontation is exhausting. Spring came slow. Grass growing back. Mud finally gone. My barn foundation cleared. New frame rising. Stronger wood. Metal roofing this time. No shortcuts. No weak points. Neighbors stopped by while I worked. Offering tools. Coffee. Silence. The good kind. The new HOA structure held its first official transparent election. Open ballots. Public counting. No executive override clauses. Watching it happen felt unreal. Months ago, they fined me for stacking wood. Now they were asking for volunteer oversight. Life flips fast when truth hits. Brad took a plea deal. Arson. Conspiracy. Insurance fraud. Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. He gave up emails. Records. Everything. Turns out the pressure list wasn't just intimidation. They coordinated enforcement to push out homeowners they didn't like. Lower income. Single parents. Retired veterans. Anyone who didn't fit the image. Control disguised as standards. Diane avoided criminal charges. But civil suits drained her financially. Her house sold below market value. She moved quietly. No goodbye. No apology. Just gone. And the strangest part, I didn't feel victory. I felt lighter. Like a storm finally passed. The spillway became symbolic. People joked about it. Don't mess with Mark or he'll turn the wheel. I laughed. But deep down, I knew something important. I never wanted to touch that wheel again. County installed automated override updates. Better downstream alerts. More safeguards. Systems evolve when they break. And Maple Ridge evolved too. One evening, the resident committee hosted a neighborhood cookout. Not fancy. Paper plates. Cheap burgers. Kids running through sprinklers. No enforcement letters taped to mailboxes. No one measuring grass height. Just normal. Diane's old best friend approached me quietly. She looked embarrassed. I didn't know how bad it was. I nodded. Most people didn't. She hesitated. You could have destroyed everything if the dam failed. There it was. The shadow question. I looked toward the horizon. Sun dipping low. If I thought it would fail, I wouldn't have touched it. And that was true. Because revenge without calculation is chaos. But calculated pressure, that's exposure. There's a difference. Late that night, I walked alone to the spillway. Water calm. Stars reflecting on its surface. The steel will glowed faint under moonlight. Cold. Still. I rested my hand on it one last time. Not to turn. Just to remember. The moment I chose action over silence. Was I perfect? No. Was I justified? Technically. Yes. Morally. That depends on who you ask. But here's what I know now. HOAs aren't monsters. People are. And people only hold power as long as others stay quiet. Maple Ridge learned that. The hard way. And so did I. My new barn stands taller now. Metal siding. Fire resistant. Flood elevated. Prepared. Not paranoid. Just aware. Neighbors wave when they pass. Not forced smiles. Real ones. Transparency reports post monthly. Budgets public. Votes recorded. Systems visible. That's how it should have always been. Sometimes I think about that first red violation letter. Final notice. For stacked firewood. It seems ridiculous now. Like a spark that lit a chain reaction. Fire. Water. Arrests. Reform. All because control went unchecked. And someone finally refused to bend. If another corrupt board ever rises here, I won't wait for a storm. I won't rely on gray zones. I'll speak first. Loud. Clear. Public. Because silence is what let it grow last time. The spillway taught me something. You don't open gates to destroy. You open them to release pressure. Before things explode. And sometimes, pressure isn't water. It's truth. So tell me. If you lived in Maple Ridge, and you saw what I saw, would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have opened the gate too?